Comrades, it's Premier Rever, and I have built yet another drag strip. I ended up having to rebuild the drag strip that we had before because turns out the map, in putting everything on the easiest mode, I didn't include gas stations. So, or the energy management. So in this map, I had to run power lines over, but we got gas stations. So as you might know from the title already, the point of this one is to try to see, I'm going to make the assumption for now that the covered vehicles generally follow the same fuel economy rules as all of the other vehicles. So what I would like to do is say, just like our crane thing, is there a best vehicle? And this came up in a discussion on the live stream where people were suggesting that the smaller vehicles had better fuel economy and were better to use. And then I kind of once again took that, well, wait a minute. I mean, I've always just been buying the biggest one. And maybe I'm wrong, right? But before we go into it too far, I do want to go over a little bit better, I think, an example of how I get to the fact that this is a 3-kilometer course, right? And I'll show you over here. I built a little setup just for demonstration purposes. If we come here, I want to put the wireframe on. If we look at this substation and we count the blocks in between the two of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 blocks. And then we come and take a look at our electrical connection where we actually get a distance. That's 100 meters. Now, it may be off a meter or two, but it's certainly, I think, a very fair and logical assumption for many reasons that each one of these blocks represents 10 meters, right? Certainly, there's a lot of logic behind that, right? Now, if we were to go build a railroad track, and you could probably do this with roads or as well, but I just chose railroad tracks because that's what I was working on the last map. And we look at this project. This railroad track is pretty close to exactly 10 of these blocks long, and it takes 58 working days. Now, I use the working days because there's more of them. It makes it like a finer measuring tool. Now, there's something else you have to watch out for when you're doing this, because sometimes it seems to, see how the working days here, sometimes you get a weird number, but so there's 58 working days, right? Well, you can move it and get different working days, but the other numbers don't necessarily change as quickly, right? Especially in the prefabs, you can say, well, look, they're changing by the tenths, but as soon as you get or let me move over a little bit. As soon as we get to I don't know if you guys can see those numbers. I hope you can, but I'm moving it in the working days here. Let's say the prefabs, the prefabs say 10 now. Now they say 11 and 77 working days. So I get all the way up to, let me go back a little bit, 84 working days before the prefabs change again. So the working days seems to be the most accurate measurement of that. And when we go exactly 10, let's say we get basically 58 working days. Now again, we don't need this. We're just going to cancel that. But so let's assume that it's 58 again. This is not the most sophisticated test in any way, but I think that makes that the fact that if you were to multiply this 10 of, these are 100 meters times 10 is 1,000 meters, a kilometer. So if we take 58 working days times 10, that's 580. So what I did was I had measured out railroad track starting with this line right here. This is pretty much on one of those blocks. And I came out 580, boom, 580, kilometer 2, and kilometer 3. So this is pretty much a 3-kilometer course. Now, I'm not sure how much it really matters, right? Because you'll see in a minute that, it's a bit ridiculous on the amount of fuel that they use to go that kilometer. So this has all really been game adjusted. Now, the other thing you'll see is that we have a track here that I can't click on anymore because it's been built. But at the same time, this is halfway. So I went 290. So we have a fuel tank or gas station halfway. And we have another fuel station here. So, and then we have another warehouse down this end. So keep that in mind when we go back down there. So each one of these, I filled up to 60. I didn't fill up to 70 because it doesn't actually go all the way up to 70. A lot of times it would stop at like 69.3 or something like that. But if I just fill to 60, then they go right to 60 each time. Now you can see here, we don't have any crops in this one. And this one probably does have crops because I've already run all these tests. This is just a summary of what I did. So there you go. So that what they would do is they would start down this end and I would pre-fill them. Here we have a gas station down this end. I didn't want them driving back and forth too much. But I would pre-fill each of these with 100 tons of crops. Nice round number. Right, and then did that to each of the three of them. And then what I did was I ran 3 separate tests. This has a dirt road, this has a gravel road, and this has an asphalt road. Obviously, because of the road speed limits, this speed is limited to 35 here, this is limited to 60, and this is limited to 110, which is actually not limiting any of these trucks, right? They can all go, they're limited by their own speed, not the speed of the road. So what I was most curious about and what I found in like the very first test from the very first minute is that no matter what road these guys were on, they burn the same amount of fuel. So in other words, even though this guy may have been much further down the road, he burned more fuel than the guy that was on this track, right? And then far more fuel to go down this road. So it's absolutely directly related. The distance you're going to be able to go on a tank of fuel is absolutely related to the difference in the speed amongst the different tracks, right? Does that make sense? So that's a very important thing. Like upgrading your roads is far more important than I would have given it credit for before this test. Definitely getting the paved roads makes a massive difference in your fuel economy, and I'll talk about that in a minute. There's a lot of numbers, so I don't want to throw too many numbers to where they just get confusing, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions either on the next live stream or whatever. One of the other things to say about at that point, so now we're kind of evaluating the roads a little bit. These roads are a hard speed limit. There's just no doubt. Like you will never go over 35, you will never go over 60, and then, not that I tested it, but I'm sure you wouldn't go over 110 on these. It makes me feel better about building the gravel roads because it's going to cost you a good chunk of change to use the gravel roads. So even though they're like completely free to build and lay down, it's going to cost you some money to deal with them. Like whenever you see a truck going down a gravel road, you're getting like a third of the gas mileage as if you were on a asphalt road. So now, the one case that's not true, and I did test it, let me click on here because it's actually easier to come to the purchasing where you guys can see the vehicles. So this CAS only does 60. And one of the reasons I did this CAS was because I wanted to see the difference between the gravel and the asphalt on a vehicle that was limited to 60 like this road is, right? Well, believe it or not, this guy on the asphalt road, same CAS truck in a sense, did go faster. Like, so, the truck is actually not limited as harshly as the road speed is. So in other words, there was times you would see this truck lurch over the 60 kilometers per hour. So keep that in mind. Like, if you do have a truck on an asphalt road, it will be slightly more efficient, even if the speed limit isn't the deciding factor, if that makes sense, the speed limit of the truck. Because this road will never let you go above 60 on it, but the truck here, which is limited to 60, goes over 60, which gives you better fuel mileage. The faster these trucks can go, it's almost like it doesn't matter how fast they're going, they're always using the same amount of fuel when they're moving, or something along those lines. At least for the estimate purposes. That might not be 100% true when they're accelerating, but that is definitely the truth of the matter overall. Like when I look at when you think about it, I ran 3 separate tests, one for each set of trucks, and definitely an observation that as they're moving on this road, they're using the same amount of fuel as they're moving on this road, but they're going 3 times as fast, right? 35 miles per hour, or I'm sorry, I'm American. Kilometers per hour versus 90 kilometers per hour. So it's not quite 3 times, but you get the idea. This guy, 60, just absolutely directly related. The fuel cost to the speed that they're traveling, period. Now, the fuel cost and the consumption, now we're talking about between the same type of vehicle. Now, when we start comparing the different vehicles to say, well, which one is best? I think the best number to use for that is the cost per ton, right? In other words, how much does it cost to run the smaller vehicle per ton? Because we're talking about, at the end of the day, yeah, this guy may have a better fuel economy, but if he's carrying less stuff, he doesn't do as much work, right? I hope that makes sense. So in other words, this guy, and this is the truth, to give you an idea, this is the fastest one, the regular one, I'll call it the biggest one, the blue tractor trailer, carries 12 tons. Well, just to give you an idea, he gets 66 liters he uses to go 1 kilometer. And I said that right, and I double checked myself. That's definitely a good ballpark number, 62. Now this guy, the littler one, he uses a lot less kilowatts. If we were to go back and look at his thing, this guy has like 35 kilowatts versus this guy's at like 160. So overall, throughout the test, this guy only used 25 liters per kilometer, right? In the neighborhood of a third, or maybe, somewhere between a third and a half of the amount of fuel to go the same kilometer. However, he's only using a third or half the fuel, but he's carrying about 1/4 as much stuff. So in other words, while this guy went a kilometer, he carried 12 tons with him. While this guy went a kilometer, he only carried 3 tons, 1/4 almost, more or less, of what this guy covered. So when you talk about who fills it up faster, to give you an idea, this little guy takes 32 trips to take 100 tons back and forth. This guy only takes 8 trips, 1/4 of the trips. So even though his gas mileage, or again, liters per kilometer, is higher, he's using more liters per kilometer, he ends up being more efficient because he takes, 4 times as much stuff with him. To the point that he's in the neighborhood of twice as efficient. So let me actually get you the percentage here. So this guy is 270. He costs us $270 in fuel, rubles in fuel, to do this. This other guy over here cost us $442. So let me divide, 442. Again, it depends on which way you want to look at this. This guy used 60% of the fuel that this guy used. So it's not quite half. And again, this number is a little different, and this guy only goes 80. But it's really close to half, 60%. So this guy used 60%, this guy used 60% less fuel or more fuel, or this guy used 60% less fuel to do the same 100 tons of crops. So even though this guy gets better mileage, as we call it in America, the better distance per liter of fuel, he didn't come out ahead by a big amount. This guy's 40% cheaper. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about $170 every time you move 100 tons, right? So if that's true, then if we go back to here or here and purchase prices, and you start looking at the purchase price, well, this guy is a lot cheaper, but it's going to be, a year or two and you'll have caught up, right? What is the difference in price? 6,000, maybe a little less than that. But if I said 6,000 divided by 170, there we go, 35. So in other words, by the time so there might be some cases that you could argue that this guy's so much cheaper if you're not going to be running constantly back and forth. But for the most part, the difference in the price and all that, this guy's definitely going to save you some money. Now, the other thing to say is I used the fuel price, if we come over here, of 180. I think when it went up to 183 already. So the higher this fuel price, and it will go up and up and up. We're only on 1960. Even though the price of the vehicles will go up too. So the only time I would ever tend to buy the little one at this point would be when in this comparison is when you're talking about like some truck that you're just not going to use all that much, like where it just doesn't matter and you'd rather just save the money because you're just going to sell it anyway. But let's also talk about something else that's really important. Again, 32 trips, 8 trips, 13 fast-forwarded minutes. I had a stopwatch going the whole time. So this was 13 minutes, which in-game is about 39 days. This guy, 53 minutes, right? So in other words, to do the same job, this guy took 4 times as long. So in other words, instead of 39 in-game days to move the same amount of stuff, the little guy took much, much longer and cost us more money to do it. So unless there's like really specific times that you would want to pick this truck versus this one, like the only other circumstance besides, well, it's just cheaper and I don't plan on it making that many trips back and forth to any place for that long, which really doesn't happen to me that much, would be if you just wanted to pull off a little bit of something. Let's say this was our electronic circuits manufacturing, right? And we didn't want to starve this. Like if you use a big truck, you're going to have you might take too many away. Where no, I want most of the stuff to be going some other direction, but I just want to grab a little bit and take it someplace else. That would be the other reason to get a little truck. But really, when you're talking about economy and a normal, I'm going to run crops or food or almost anything else, you're going to run a lot less trips. Another argument could be, well, if you have a really slow factory, like let's say your meat factory is just incredibly slow, you may want deliveries more often, right? But even then, the delivery guy is going to be running back and forth a lot more. So in the long run, you're still probably better off biting the bullet, let this guy fill up all the way, and then But I could see where you might use a smaller truck just because you want to. And you don't, you do want that first delivery to get there more quickly. But there's just no doubt if you're basing it on overall economy, there may be a few circumstances you would go with the little one. Now, as far as the CAS goes, no. Like even on the same paved road, this guy was twice as much. Took longer time. Just got about less fuel mileage because again he was limited in his speed. If you compare him to over here, like between the two roads, he got a little bit better mileage on this road, but not a huge amount, enough to make a difference. So, but if you are on a gravel road and you have a slower vehicle like this, it's not going to make too much difference whether you bought the slower vehicle here. Like in other words, it's just upgrading the roads. If you just only had these CAS trucks, I wouldn't pave the roads, in other words. But if you had these guys, I definitely would. To give you an idea of what difference the road made, like let's assume that this is just a far more efficient way of moving a ton. 40%, or well, no, not 40%. What is 0.6, 1 over X? 60, this guy is like 60% more efficient than this guy. Depends on how you look at your percentages there. But he's significantly more efficient than this one. And he's more than twice as efficient as this one. Even on this road, where they're both limited by the speed, this guy still gets significantly, better mileage, even when they're limited. Like there's no truck was cheaper per ton, per cost than this truck on any one of these roads, right? So when you're talking about what is the difference between the vehicles? There's things get a little bit more even when you talk about, this dirt road, like because this guy ends up costing quite a bit more to run on the dirt road, 3 times as much. The numbers do matter less, right? Like this guy gets some of his advantage because he goes 90 and that cuts down on his fuel. So if you cut down on his fuel, you cut it down more, if that makes sense. Especially versus this guy. But no, even on the dirt roads, you're talking about like the same percentages across the board. You're almost always better off going with the big one, unless, like I said, unless you have some really specific purpose, you know, and even then, that's pushing it, like because I think a lot of times you could say just load me 50%, right? And then you might get into a situation where, this guy's not quite as efficient if he's only loading 50% at a certain stop. Then you might be better off going with another vehicle. But even then, I wouldn't go with the one that's limited to 60 kilometers an hour, right? There you go. So I think that's everything I wanted to say about it. It's, I know I didn't do the test. Let me know what you think about the difference. I took a lot of time showing you guys the crane test last time, and I wanted to keep this video a bit shorter for everybody. And I'm more than happy to discuss one way or the other through the comments, like whatever numbers. If I had to give you an idea of what each one of these costs on the asphalt road, just so you know, this one was $270 to move the 100 tons, or 27 cents to move it 3 kilometers. Divide that by 3, right? And this guy is in the neighborhood of 9 cents per ton per kilometer. This guy, I didn't necessarily need to open them. This guy, the CAS, the middle one that's limited to 60 on the asphalt road, cost us $560, which is 56 cents for the round trip. So if we then say, okay, divide this by 3, because it's 3 kilometers or whatever, that we hauled the stuff. I know it's twice that, but you need a round trip to haul things. So you're talking about 3 divided into 56 is what? Like 18? Something in that ballpark, I think. So this guy's tossing us about 18 cents per trip. And then this guy, which is a little bit cheaper, 442. So that's 44 cents. And I'll just do the math just to make sure I get it right, because it's, you're talking about just under 14 cents for this guy. So this guy's 9 cents to haul a ton a kilometer. This guy's 14 cents to haul a ton a kilometer. And this guy's about 18 cents to haul a ton a kilometer. So hands down, I mean, just like that's way better for this guy when you think about it. So anyway, I know there's a little flaws. I wouldn't take those numbers too much, but there's too big a difference between the results for that. Not even if there's a little errors here and there that I made, I feel pretty confident that I'm always going to buy the tractor trailer unless I have a real good reason not to. Anyway, there you go. Like I said, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know comments, questions, concerns, criticisms. I'll take them all. Have a good day. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.